Hello everyone. Welcome to Virtual Soybean Scout School. My name is Larry Steckel. I'm an Extension Weed Specialist here with the University of Tennessee. And today we're going to go out and look at some of the plots and really kind of look at identifying some different weed species, primarily some of the identifying characteristics of palmer amaranth, which has become a huge weeds issue here lately, and then kind of show some show and tell on some different management tactics to control this weed. One of the most difficult weed species we're really challenged with trying to manage today is palmer pigweed or palmer amaranth. And it's really unique for weeds in a number of different ways, and really unique for pigweeds in that there's male and female plants. And the males, all they do is produce pollen, and they produce a lot of pollen. And the females, all they do is produce seed, and they can produce a tremendous amount of seed. One female palmer pigweed that gets a little light, not competing with real heavy with the crop, and gets some rainfall, can easily produce over 1 million seeds. Just one palmer pigweed. And that's one of the reasons it's become such an issue. It's just this high seed production that it has. You get just one female palmer pigweed plant in your field, and it can produce a lot of seed. That next year you're going to have a spot in the field the size of a pickup truck or a couple pickup trucks. If you don't do anything about it by that third year, and you're not able to control that weed, it's going to be covering most of the field and be carried with the harvesting equipment, typically a combine or a cotton picker. So you couple that seed production with the fact now that we have a biotype in the state of Tennessee that's become highly resistant to glyphosate or Roundup herbicides. It's spread just unbelievably fast. Identifying the palmer pigweed species from a lot of the other pigweed species we have in Tennessee and in the Mid-South, there's about 10 different pigweed species, but there's only one that's glyphosate resistant currently, and that's palmer amaranth. And it's fairly unique, as I mentioned, from other pigweeds from a couple different instances, but one of the biggest is the flowering branches. Palmer amaranth, you measure the flowering branches in feet, typically. Where with a lot of other pigweed species like smooth pigweed or even water hemp, you're going to be measuring them in inches, a lot less length in the flowering branches. And that's one of the better ways to identify them early on during the flowering process. Early, when the pigweed first come up, the best way to identify it really from some of the other pigweed species is just the architecture of the leaves, how close they are to the main plant. The petiole is a very long, and the leaf has a good distance between it and the main stem of the plant. That's very different from what you'll see with other pigweed species. The leaf will be much closer to the main branch of the stem because the petioles are much shorter. And then also the aspect of hairs on the leaves. Palmer pigweed has no hair, no pubescence on the leaves or the stems. Smooth pigweed is anything but smooth. That we have a lot of that in the state as well. It has hair all over it. A lot of genetic diversity. So you got some red on the stem and the leaf and the petioles. And then the very next one standing next to it, you know, may came off the same mother plant. You don't see any red on it. It's all green. A lot of genetic diversity in it. And you also see a lot of outcrossing type with it, where it'll start crossing with other pigweed species, and then you really do get some unique looking plants. One other thing I wanted to mention on the biology of palmer amaranth or palmer pigweed, it is not native to the Mid-South. It's actually native to the desert Southwest. And there was some work done at UC Davis quite a few years ago now, back in the 80s, looking at the photosynthetic rate. They were studying the photosynthetic rate of desert plants, and they found palmer amaranth had the highest photosynthetic rate of any plant yet measured. It's very, very competitive. Again, it's kind of a desert-derived plant, so when it gets into the upper 90s and our crops shut down, it's right at home and can get away from them in a hurry. It's nothing for it here in the middle of June, where we are today, to grow 2 to maybe 3 inches a day. And that has big bearings on how we try and manage it, because with the herbicides we're using today, the Flex Star type products, the Ignite type products, we need to be able to spray palmer pigweed that's basically 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches tall. If it gets above that, we're not going to control it very effectively with the herbicides we're using today. That's a big change from just a couple years ago when glyphosate would control them at any height. Okay, the study I'm standing in today is looking at different applications of Ignite herbicide on Liberty Link soybeans. We moved from glyphosate, which is a systemic type herbicide, and you really don't need good coverage. Most of our growers have been putting on with Roundup 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 gallons per acre. The herbicides we're moving to now, like Ignite or even Flexstar, we need much better coverage in order to get good control with these type herbicides. And what I mean by more coverage is more gallons per acre. And that's what we're looking at here today in these treatments, where on one side we have sprayed Ignite herbicide on this Liberty Link soybeans at 10 gallons per acre, and in the other treatment we have it sprayed at 15 gallons per acre. And we see a marked increase in the control of the Palmer pigweed with the 15 gallon per acre rate as opposed to the 10 gallon per acre rate. And it's just really an artifact that we moved from a herbicide that's systemic, doesn't need good coverage, to herbicides that do need good coverage like Ignite. Okay, the study we're looking at here is really examining the whole system of managing glyphosate-resistant Palmer pigweed. On my left here, we have basically an untreated check, and on the right, we have actually a system where we went out with a pre-herbicide that's going to give us some residual control of Palmer pigweed that was applied the day we planted the soybeans, and then it's followed up with a timely herbicide application over the top on Palmer pigweed that's 2 to 3 inches tall. And it really takes that entire system to get consistent Palmer amaranth control in cotton or in soybeans. But in the case here with soybeans, we get a pre on there. These pre's, basically when you apply them to the soil, you really don't know when they're going to give out. It could be 2.5 weeks after application, it could be 3, it could be 4, or if you don't get a rain on them at all and they don't become activated, they may not work, period. So it's very critical you have eyes on the field and know the pre-herbicide is working and that weeds aren't germinating, because if they are, you have to be very timely putting a herbicide over the top, whether it's Ignite herbicide on Liberty Link soybeans or maybe a Flexstar or a Blazer on just regular soybeans. And you really need to have those herbicides applied prior to the Palmer pigweed really getting 4, 5, 6 inches tall. Once it becomes that tall with these herbicides, your control is going to be very inconsistent. This is when you want to be out and seeing it. You don't really want to get much taller than that to control it. This is Flexstar sprayed just a little bit too late. When it gets much above 2 to 3 inches tall like this one was, with a lot of these herbicides we're using now like Flexstar, if it's 3 to 4 inches tall, and particularly if it's dry and hot, you'll take off the main terminal, take out the apical meristem, and you'll get these suckering out down low from these lateral buds. And it almost makes one plant look like 2 or 3 or 4. I don't know how well you can see the lateral buds, but down low. And that's a typical response. If it's a little too big, or even if you're getting out there and spraying timely, and you get dry conditions for 2, 3, 4 days, dry, hot conditions, and it just doesn't translocate into the plant very well, and you'll get a lot of burning on the plant. And then after it takes out the apical meristem, you'll have this lateral growth out the bottom. And we're seeing more and more of that this last couple of years as we resort to herbicides that are contact type herbicides. Again, you can somewhat overcome this, as I mentioned, with coverage, higher gallons per acre, but regardless, if it's 5, 6 inches tall, it doesn't matter what kind of coverage you get, you will not control it with any of the herbicides we have today. The study you see here is really looking at total post control of Palmer amaranth in soybeans, and it basically was designed to where what we used to do with Roundup, when we just went with Roundup or glyphosate over the top of our soybeans, and again we could control them at any height. This time though, glyphosate's not going to work on these Palmer pigweeds, so we're using a PPO herbicide. In this case, you're seeing Flexstar and Reflex, different formulations of that herbicide. What you see though is if you're just a couple days late, if you don't get out when it's 2 to 3 inches tall and spray a Flexstar application, you will see grow back, as you're seeing in this particular field. Timeliness is so critical, and that's why a system where you go out with a pre, get control early, and then come back with an early post-emergence application prior to the pigweed getting really 2 inches tall to 3 inches tall is the most consistent way to control it.